Chapter 11. By the time they reached the quayside at the city's busy port, Splidge, Doreen and the Crag were exhausted. It had been quite an ordeal. It was mid-morning and they hadn't eaten or drunk anything since the day before, and they were ravenous. Splidge thanked George and Freddie for rescuing them and said he hoped to see them at the Royal Tournament. The fisherman enthused at the idea and suggested they all meet up to share a jug of ginger ale before the big event. Stepping off the boat, Splidge and Doreen, and the Crag riding on its master's shoulder, gazed at the warehouses that lined the water's edge. The tall, half-brick, half-timber monstrosities were 5 stories high. Double doors on each level opened onto small platforms where burly men toiled with rope and pulleys, hauling up sacks of grain, spices, tea and coffee to stack in the vast storage rooms. A cacophony of noise deafened the Royal Cragflinger and his friends. A foreman bellowed orders, workmen shouted to one another, and there was an endless clanking of chains and clatter from the mechanical lifting machines. Deliveries were continuous. The goods arrived in stout ships, mostly from the remotest part of northern Gud, docking between first light and sunset. Frigates, trows, tugs and barges were laden with supplies for the myriad of craftsmen that lived and worked in the city. The artisan workshops were busy turning leather into saddles, shoes and bags, wool into clothing, blankets and carpets, timber into houses and fine furniture. Scraps of material and cut-offs of wood were offered to the umbrella makers, whose trade depended on leftovers. Boxes and wooden containers were stacked everywhere, with their owners' names chalked or stencilled in ink, while child porters swarmed the place, shunting heavy packages and carrying parcels strapped to their backs or piled up in their arms. Apprentices collected their master's supplies and staggered to waiting carts and wagons. "That's strange," Doreen said, while they walked through an area towering with large crates. "What is?" Splidge asked. "All these huge boxes." "How do you mean?" "Well, look. They've all got my father's name on them." "Is it a delivery for him, then?" Doreen peered into one of the wooden containers. "It's full of coal. What does my father need with all this coal? There's tons of the stuff." Splidge shrugged. He was sniffing the air. Something smelt good. In the distance, at the edge of the mayhem, Splidge spotted a bunch of hawkers selling hot food. He led his companions across the busy quayside, past the packing cases, milk churns and boxes of cheese rounds, yielding to the temptation of fried sausage and onion in soft bread baps. "Hey!" called a familiar voice. It was Snotty, and for once he wasn't descending from a lamppost. "Hello, Snotty," Splidge hailed. The soot-covered boy grinned. "Cor blimey," he said, eyeing up Doreen, impressed that Splidge had somehow befriended the girl with the raven hair. While they munched their tasty feast, Splidge told Snotty all about their recent adventures. Snotty had a sullen face by the time Splidge had finished. "What's the matter?" Doreen asked. Breaking into a big smile, the lamp boy chuckled. "It sounds amazing. I don't half wish I'd been with you." "Huh!" groaned the Crag. "You weren't being tossed to and from the edge of a waterfall." Everyone burst out laughing. "I think you were the bravest of all," Doreen said as she patted the Crag. "So, Doreen, what are you going to do now?" Snotty asked. The girl shook her head. "I don't know. I can't go home." "No, the Baron will kill you, won't he?" Splidge said. Doreen put her head in her hands. "Couldn't you stay with Splidge at the palace?" Snotty suggested. Splidge frowned. "Have you seen the cowshed? It's not exactly fit for a lady." Snotty scoffed. "Yeah, it is. It's better than where I live, and loads safer than sleeping rough." Doreen and Splidge exchanged glances, and the girl leant over to her hero. "It depends if Splidge will let me," she said, giving Snotty a wink. Before the Cragflinger could answer, Snotty nudged Splidge in his elbow. "Course he will." Splidge smiled. "It would be my pleasure." "What about the king? Won't he mind?" asked Doreen.
"Never mind the king," the crag interjected. "He's a pussycat. Besides, he needs to keep Splidge happy. He needs him to win the tournament."
Voices were raised and bad language filled the air. A commotion had broken out by the main entrance to the palace. Wagons loaded with ladders, planks, dust sheets, paint pots, and all the other paraphernalia used by builders and decorators were parked up in front of the grand entrance. Groggins was talking animatedly to a group of workmen.
"I keep telling you, you cannot use this door. Only royal dignitaries, members of the city council, and special guests are permitted through here. I'm sorry, but you must access the palace from the tradesman's entrance."
"Don't be ridiculous," answered an obnoxious, short, plump individual with cropped black hair, a pencil moustache, and paint-stained overalls. "We have to go through there," he continued, while he unloaded a step-ladder from his wagon. "It's the quickest way to the throne room, mate. We ain't going to hoik our gear through the back door. I don't care if it's reserved for the Prince of Darkness himself. This is the most direct way in." Groggins sighed and shrugged his shoulders. Life was too short. They were not going to agree.
All right, he wheezed. "But please take care. There are many priceless antiques in the hallway, and the Royal Gud could never replace them. He won't react kindly should anything get broken."
"If you are insinuating, mate, that me and my men are clumsy, accident-prone nincompoops, I better warn you that we do not appreciate that sort of talk. We can just as easily take our clobber away from this dump and work somewhere else. The storm damage has been severe, so there's plenty of demand for our professional services. That might be a bit inconvenient for the king, of course, but if you'd rather we up sticks and toddle off..." The foreman smiled smugly and continued, "We ain't expensive, and from what I hear, King Guddamac can't afford to be choosy, can he?" Groggins knew when he was beaten, and what they said did make sense. It would be far easier for them to take their equipment through the main entrance and up the central staircase, rather than weaving through the warren of back passages. On this occasion, royal protocol would have to be waived. Spotting Splidge, Doreen and the crag crossing the drawbridge, Groggins consented to the builder's wishes. He pleaded with them to be careful and scuttled off. The foreman shook his head and rolled his eyes. Turning to his men, who had gathered in a bunch to await instructions, he snorted, "Can you believe it? The audacity of the fella! As if bumbling and blunder is anything like the butter-fingered oafs he takes us for. Huh!" Grabbing his stepladder and a bag of tools, the foreman stomped off through the main palace doors with all the airs and graces of the royal Gud himself. Unfortunately, he misjudged his footing, tripped on the step, and fell flat on his face, sending his painting equipment tumbling. His men, who were following closely behind, stumbled over their boss, and they all collapsed into a heap. Splidge and his friends watched the commotion from the gatehouse. "Hello, Groggins," the Cragflinger said, while the servant shuffled over, puffing and panting as usual. Groggins eyed up the unsightly threesome.
"My goodness, what's happened to you?"
They were all covered in mud, and their clothes were in tatters. We've had a bit of an adventure," Splidge grinned sheepishly.
"It looks like it. And who's this young lady?"
Groggins stared at Doreen. He knew perfectly well who she was, and more to the point, to whom she was related. "I'm Doreen." "I know what you're thinking," added Splidge, "but Doreen has severed all connections with her father." Groggins didn't have time to listen.
"Never mind all that. I've been looking for you all morning. The king wishes to see you urgently."
"The king wants to see me?"
"Yes, he wants to check on your progress."
"You mean he wants to see if I'm any good at cragflinging?"
"Well, yes, something like that. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. As your employer, he just wants to make sure that you shall be the winning Cragflinger this year. He's rather depending on you."
"Oh dear. I better get changed then." Splidge was hoping to have a bit of a rest that morning. None of them had had much sleep in the last 24 hours.
"I shall tell the king that you'll be ready in half an hour," Groggins told him,
and hurried off. Sleep would have to wait. Doreen assured Splidge that she would be all right, left on her own, and once they were settled in the cowshed, Splidge made sure the stove was stoked with wood and the kettle put on to make a pot of tea. "I think I need a wash," said Doreen, spying the water jug and bowl. Splidge crossed to the wardrobe. "Maybe I should dress up for the king. What do you think, Crag?" The Crag didn't answer. It was on the bed, snoring merrily. "Look at it. I swear that creature could close its eyes and fall asleep in a force 10 blizzard." Splidge reached into the wardrobe for the golden frock coat. Doreen had already seen him wearing it at the welcome feast, but he felt so proud in it, he couldn't wait to show her again. The trouble was, the cupboard was empty.
"Gone?"
thundered the king, agog. Splidge met the king in the walled kitchen garden. The royal guard sat on a reinforced wooden bench in the blazing sunshine, his velvet shirt sleeves and trouser legs rolled up to reveal an immense quantity of pink flesh. But the king's face was contorted with anger.
"How can it be gone?" he bellowed. "It is priceless and cannot be replaced."
Splidge shrugged his shoulders. "Perhaps it was stolen."
"Stolen? That's outrageous, disastrous. Tell me you have misplaced it."
The king rose to his feet, and his huge bulk towered over the boy. The big man glanced over at the orange mop creature, which was perching on the target wall, waiting for the cragflinging practice session to start. The king snarled at the thing and turned back to Splidge.
"You pathetic, ignorant little boy."
The royal guard shook his fist while he paced back and forth, his anger building like a volcano about to erupt. Splidge stood motionless, not knowing what to say.
"Boy,"
the king roared as he advanced on the lad,
"you have no idea what the frock coat is worth, or how precious it is to me. You know nothing."
The royal guard stood in front of the quivering Cragflinger, his massive bulk seeming to have doubled in size.
"You are a dunderhead, a buffoon, a dullard, and a dimwit. You are oblivious to the coat's history and its heritage. If you had known its importance to the tournament, the city, and to me, you would never have let it out of your sight."
The exasperated king grabbed the unsuspecting Crag and marched to the other side of the kitchen garden, where he pulled out its telescopic nose, spun it above his head, and hurled it at the Crag target wall. The creature hurtled through the air and landed smack in the middle of the target. Bullseye.
"Impressed? I can do it again, boy, if you like, and 1,000 times more," taunted the king. "That was no fluke."
Splidge looked blankly at the regal madman, parading with his trousers rolled up and his flabby forearms exposed.
"Oh, why I ever put my faith in you, I do not know. Imagine, a street urchin comes begging for work, and I stupidly make him Royal Cragflinger. What was I thinking?"
The king thundered over to the target wall and wrenched the dazed Crag off. Again he paced to the other side of the garden, and, with a powerful wind-up, unexpected twist of the hips and a nifty flick of the wrist, the king flung the orange fluff ball. It flew like a cannonball and hammered straight into the target wall with an echoing thud. Bullseye. The throw was harder than anything the lad had ever managed, and he feared for his little friend's life. Splidge prized the splattered Crag from the brick surface. Its eyes were shut, and it trembled. As the boy stroked its warm, fluffy body, the Crag's eyes flickered and then blinked open.
"Wow, that was good!"
Splidge gasped. "You like that?"
"That's what I call a throw. I couldn't cope with one of those every day, but now and then, well, it makes you feel alive."
"Really? You mean after that throw you're all right? No broken bones?" The Crag laughed.
"Couldn't be better. With a powerful and skillful throw like that, you could beat all the contenders, hands down. The king knows a thing or two about."
The king let out a gut-wrenching cry, and then groaned. Splidge, thinking he was about to get another earful, turned round and was astonished to see the king's mammoth body falling backwards. The great mountain of blubber crashed to the grass. He lay flat on his back, his legs wriggling violently, his face blue, and his hands clutching his chest in obvious agony.
"He's having a heart attack,"
the crag cried, rushing over to him. "Oh no! What can we do?" cried Splidge. The king roared with intense pain as he rolled himself over onto all fours and crawled about like a baby elephant that had lost its mother. The crag trotted behind and tried to catch up with him.
"We have to get the king to sit down. Moving about like this will only make it worse. It could kill him."
Splidge tried talking to the big man to get him to stay still, but the king swiped at the boy, knocking him over. The crag couldn't reason with the royal Gud either, and was nearly squashed by his giant knees.
"Oh dear," the crag wailed. "The blood can't pump through his heart and he's becoming delirious."
King Guddamac staggered to his feet and started stomping around the garden. All the while his fist clamped against his chest. He let out another tumultuous bellow, and Splidge saw that his eyes had rolled back so only the white parts were showing.
"We'll never get him to quieten down at this rate, and he'll have a cardiac arrest,"
moaned the orange mop creature. But Splidge had an idea. He whipped his friend up off the ground, extracted its telescopic nose, and flung the orange beast at the king. It smacked him right in the face, and was enough to make King Guddamac stop in his tracks, blinking rapidly for a couple of seconds. The king then teetered over and crashed to the ground, landing on his oversized bottom. Splidge rushed up to him and shouted in the king's face, "Will you stop moving, you great fat oaf? If you don't, you shall die, and none of us wants that to happen." The king stared blankly at the boy, daring not to move a muscle. Although the royal lungs were strained from all the exertion, it wasn't long until normal breathing returned and the pain in his chest eased. His flabby face dropped forward, and the supreme leader began to snore. "Blimey," said Splidge. "He really must lose some weight."